Hey everybody, it's Lynn Pratt. Thanks so much for joining me today. You'll notice from my desk that I'm not in my normal studio. I'm actually at our little cabin at the lake today. So I'm painting with my travel palette. So this is my travel palette. Sometimes I do use an extra plate if I have to mix large areas of color as well, but for the most part I just keep everything in the palette. I've made a little cheat sheet of sorts for all the colors that are in my palette so I can easily see exactly what I have here versus what I normally use at home. When I'm out, I like to just use pads of paper. This one is actually a hot press, just a smaller 7 by 10 inch bound watercolor pad. I usually use cold press, however this one just happens to be hot press. So you can see I've drawn my sketch on. Super simple. I'm keeping this one simple. It's just going to be a sunset on the lake painting. My tools are just laid out on my little desk, so you'll see I don't need any of the stuff I normally have in my studio. I just have my travel palette, my brushes, paper, and some water. The colors that I have out on my palette are permanent rose, cobalt blue, I have some raw sienna and some new gamboge, and I have a mixture of cobalt blue and burnt sienna. And those are the main colors that I'm going to be using for this first wash. I've used a hockey brush to wet my paper so I can do a full wet into wet wash of color. You can use any brush to wet your paper. And I'm just adding the colors in one at a time. They're not mixed at all on my palette. I'm just adding and letting them mix right on the wet paper. I've let that first wash almost completely dry, enough so that I won't mess it up if I paint over it. Now I'm coming in and using the mixture of cobalt blue and burnt sienna to put in the darker clouds. Into this, I'm adding some of the other colors on the palette into those clouds as I'm adding them. I'm making sure that I have some darker areas and lighter areas within those dark clouds, that they're not all just one value. Unfortunately, my video putting in the first layer of water and the mountains and land didn't come in, but I just used the Payne's Gray to put the two different areas of land in, and some burnt sienna and cobalt for the water, just making sure that all my lines are horizontal. The birds are also put in with the Payne's Gray, and I'm just using multiple layers on top of the land just to give it a little different look so it's not all one value. I'm adding the same Payne's Gray and burnt sienna and cobalt mixture in on the water to make sure that there's some darker areas in the water. I'm adding multiple layers to the clouds just to darken up some areas and make them pop out a little bit more. Thanks so much for joining me in this quick little tutorial to paint a sunset over the lake. Let's paint!